The night was cold, and the empty highway stretched like a forgotten scar, shimmering faintly under flickering streetlights. A battered pickup swerved suddenly, its door opening with a harsh creak. The driver, a man with a cruel glare, shouted, "Get out, worthless mutt," before shoving the frightened dog into the road. The stray tumbled, yelping in pain, its scarred body scraping against the unforgiving asphalt. The truck sped away, tail lights fading into the darkness, leaving silence broken only by the dog's ragged breathing. The animal staggered to its paws, eyes wide, filled with fear and desperate longing for someone to care. The scar across its muzzle caught the glint of headlights from a passing car, but no one stopped. Alone, trembling and abandoned, the dog howled, a sound raw with sorrow, echoing into the night like a plea for mercy the world had forgotten. The stray limped toward the roadside ditch, each step faltering as pain rippled through his scarred body. His breath came in sharp bursts, eyes scanning desperately for shelter. A distant owl hooted, its cry hollow against the night. Hunger gnawed at him, twisting his belly into knots. He sniffed at a crumpled paper bag fluttering in the cold wind, but it was empty, carrying only the faint smell of discarded fries. The dog whimpered softly, curling against the damp earth, pressing his muzzle into his paws as though trying to hide from the cruel world. His body shivered violently, both from the cold and from the memory of the man's harsh voice echoing, "Worthless mutt." Yet deep inside, a spark of hope flickered, fragile but unbroken, as his tired eyes lifted once more toward the road where faint lights still glowed. A harsh wind swept over the highway, rattling dry leaves across the pavement like brittle bones. The dog lifted his head, ears twitching at every sound, body tense with fear. His eyes darted as headlights appeared in the distance, the bright beams burning into his vision. A car slowed, and for a moment his tail twitched in hesitant hope, but it accelerated past, leaving only exhaust fumes. The dog staggered forward, paws dragging against the gravel shoulder, each step carving into his pads. He whimpered as the memory of warm hands flashed across his mind, a distant echo of love, long gone. His heart yearned for safety, for a place where cruelty did not linger. But only the hollow silence of the night replied, swallowing his weak whines into the void. The dog's body quivered with exhaustion, and he collapsed onto a patch of brittle weeds. His ribs rose and fell in shallow breaths, eyes glazed with fatigue. Above, the moon shone pale and distant, casting shadows across his trembling frame. A faint sound stirred his ears, the rustling of another small creature nearby. His head lifted weakly, gaze meeting a stray kitten peering from the weeds, tiny body shaking. The kitten mewed softly, its cry fragile, lost against the empty road. For the first time since his abandonment, the dog's eyes softened, a flicker of kinship igniting. His paw reached out slightly, trembling but gentle, as though to reassure the fragile life beside him that neither of them was truly alone. The dog shifted closer, curling protectively around the fragile kitten. His weary body created a shield against the wind as the small creature pressed against his side, seeking warmth. The kitten purred faintly, the vibration fragile yet comforting. The dog lowered his head, eyes closing briefly, and for a fleeting moment, the ache of abandonment dulled. His scarred muzzle touched the kitten's fur, a silent promise etched in that simple gesture. He would protect her, even when he himself had nothing left. The highway stretched endlessly behind them, but here, in this fragile bond, hope stirred quietly. Though broken and bruised, he had found something worth enduring the night for, a spark that might guide him toward a family he had yet to meet. Dawn crept slowly over the horizon, soft light chasing away the heavy shadows of the night. The dog stirred, his body stiff but his eyes drawn to the kitten nestled against his chest. She stirred too, stretching her fragile paws before pressing closer. The dog lowered his head, watching her tiny frame, a spark of something unfamiliar warming his chest. He had been cast aside, deemed worthless, yet here was a creature who clung to him as though he was her shield. Hunger gnawed at him, but the kitten's faint purr dulled his pain. He thought of the truck fading into darkness, of cruel words hurled at him, yet his gaze on her softened. "I will not leave you," his heart whispered, though no sound left his throat. For the first time since he was abandoned, his spirit clung to more than survival. It clung to connection. The dog rose carefully, legs unsteady but determined. The kitten mewed in protest, stumbling after him with clumsy steps. He turned back, waiting, his scarred face patient as she caught up. Together they moved toward the town in the distance, faint rooftops visible under the rising sun. The dog's ribs ached, hunger biting deep, but he pressed forward, guided not by need alone, but by the small life at his side. Passing cars whooshed by, indifferent to the fragile pair on the roadside. The dog's eyes lingered on one vehicle, his gaze filled with yearning, but it never slowed. The kitten stumbled again, and he lowered his head, nudging her gently, encouraging her forward. Each step was an act of will, not only for survival but for something greater, the faint hope of belonging. A cluster of houses appeared as they neared the town's edge, their chimneys breathing smoke into the morning sky. The dog stopped, watching carefully, instincts alert for danger. A man carrying groceries passed by, glancing once before shaking his head and moving on. The rejection stung, though it was not unexpected. The kitten mewed, her fragile cry swallowed by the noise of traffic. The dog stepped forward, cautious but resolute, his paws carrying him toward the faint smell of food drifting from the market square. Every sound, footsteps, doors slamming, voices shouting, pressed against him like threats. Yet for every flicker of fear, there was the kitten brushing against his leg, grounding him. Though the world had turned its back on him, he was not walking into it alone. The market smelled of bread, roasted meat, and spilled fruit, a cruel reminder of hunger. The dog's stomach growled, but his steps faltered at the sight of humans bustling in every direction. Shouts and laughter echoed, and the kitten pressed herself against his leg, frightened by the chaos. A vendor noticed them and waved his hand angrily, shouting, "Shoo! Get out of here!" The words cut deep, echoing the cruelty he had endured. The dog lowered his head, ears folding back, but did not retreat. He shielded the kitten with his body, eyes steady despite the sting of rejection. The smell of roasted food made his mouth water, but he knew better than to beg. Instead, he turned, guiding the kitten toward a quieter corner, his loyalty stronger than his hunger. They found refuge behind a bakery, the air heavy with the scent of warm bread. The dog settled against the wall, the kitten curled tightly against his chest. His eyes softened as he watched her sleep, her tiny body rising and falling with fragile breaths. Hunger still gnawed at him, and his body trembled with fatigue. But here in the quiet corner, he felt a fragile sense of peace. He had been cast away, deemed worthless, but this bond gave him purpose. He rested his scarred muzzle on his paws, gaze drifting toward the sky. He did not know what awaited him, but for the first time, he felt a path was opening. The world had been cruel, yet perhaps in protecting her, he could find the family he longed for. The dog and kitten wandered further into town, but the streets grew harsher as morning life swelled. Children pointed and laughed, tossing pebbles toward them while adults walked past with indifference. A boy shouted, "Dirty mutt, go away!" and the sound pierced like a blade. The dog lowered his head, ears flattened, while shielding the kitten from the cruel laughter. Fear rippled through the small gray creature as she pressed tighter against him. The dog's scar caught the sunlight, a mark of both his suffering and survival. He longed for kindness but found only ridicule. Each harsh voice reminded him of his abandonment, yet he endured silently. Protecting the fragile life at his side became his only answer to cruelty. The market alley grew louder with the sound of shouting vendors. The dog sniffed desperately at a pile of discarded crates, searching for scraps. A rotten apple rolled toward him, but he nudged it aside, knowing it was not enough to feed them both. The kitten pawed weakly at a dry bread crust, nibbling but coughing as crumbs stuck in her throat. From a stall nearby, a man barked, "Keep those strays out of here," and threw a bucket of water. The cold splash drenched them, their bodies shivering as laughter erupted from bystanders. The dog stood tall, dripping and trembling, his gaze steady even as humiliation burned. He turned his back on the cruelty, gently nudging the kitten away, each step heavy but unwavering. Later, the pair stumbled into a back alley where trash cans overflowed. The dog pawed at a torn bag, pulling out a bone stripped of meat. His stomach twisted in hunger, but he set it down for the kitten. She gnawed at it eagerly, tiny teeth scraping. The dog watched silently, his ribs heaving with fatigue. A sudden clang startled them as a man kicked a can, shouting, "Get out of here!" The dog barked once, a weak but defiant sound, before lowering his head submissively. The kitten froze, wide-eyed, trembling against his leg. The man cursed, waving his arms, and they bolted from the alley, paws echoing against the concrete. The world seemed determined to remind them they did not belong. By evening, the streets grew colder, the sun dipping below the rooftops. The dog's legs wobbled from exhaustion as he guided the kitten toward a narrow bridge. Below, dark water rushed, carrying scraps of trash with it. A group of teenagers leaned on the railing, noticing the strays. One sneered, "Look at that ugly thing," while another tossed a stone that splashed into the river near them. The kitten cried, startled, but the dog pressed close, shielding her once more. His amber eyes, though tired, glared with quiet defiance. Every insult, every rejection carved deeper into him, yet he carried the weight without breaking. Beneath his scars, a spark of resilience flickered, demanding that he endure. As night fell, the dog and kitten found a collapsed shed at the edge of town. The wooden boards leaned dangerously, gaps letting in the cold air. He nosed the kitten inside, curling around her for warmth. His body shook from hunger, but his eyes softened as he watched her drift to sleep. The sound of distant laughter from the town stung, a reminder of their rejection. Yet within the fragile shelter, a sense of fragile safety grew. He lowered his head to the ground, breathing deeply, the scar across his muzzle catching faint moonlight through the cracks. Though battered and weary, he had endured the cruelty of the day, clinging to one truth: he was no longer alone. The morning sun broke through thin clouds as the dog stirred from uneasy sleep. The kitten stretched, blinking up at him with wide, trusting eyes. He nudged her gently, urging her toward the town again. His body ached, but his spirit remained tethered to the fragile life beside him. As they stepped into the narrow street, a young woman noticed them. Her eyes lingered on the dog's scar, recognition flickering across her face. She whispered, "Could it be?" and dropped her grocery bag. The dog froze, muscles tense, uncertain of her intent. Something in her expression carried neither cruelty nor fear, but a strange familiarity, as though the past had just stepped into the present. The world seemed to pause around them. The woman crouched slowly, voice trembling as she spoke. "I know you. I know those eyes." Her hand extended, trembling between hesitation and hope. Memories stirred within the dog. Flashes of gentle hands, warm laughter, a place once called home. His scar burned with the reminder of betrayal, yet her gaze was not cold like the others. The kitten mewed nervously, pressing close to his chest. The dog lowered his head, torn between fear and recognition. The woman's voice broke as she whispered, "I thought you were gone." The air grew heavy with the weight of truth waiting to be revealed. The dog's body remained tense, caught in the fragile space between past pain and the possibility of belonging once more. The woman's memory unfolded, her voice trembling as she explained, "You were trained. A service dog. You saved my father once, do you remember? They said you were lost." The dog blinked, images flashing across his mind, running through fields, guiding a kind old man, being praised with gentle words. The scar across his muzzle throbbed, a reminder of when it all ended in betrayal. He remembered the cruel hands that replaced love with neglect. The woman's tears spilled as she reached closer, whispering, "You were never worthless. You were everything." The dog trembled, torn between stepping forward and retreating. The kitten mewed softly, her small sound bridging the space between rejection and rediscovery. The sound of harsh footsteps echoed down the street. A man approached, his expression cold, his suit polished but eyes filled with disdain. "Is that mutt still alive?" he sneered. The dog stiffened, memories flooding back of this very man raising a hand in cruelty. The woman's face paled, her voice sharp. You abandoned him." The kitten hissed faintly, fur puffed as if sensing the danger. The man scoffed, dismissive. "He was weak, worthless. I did what was necessary." Rage burned in the woman's eyes as she stepped protectively between the dog and the man. The dog's heart pounded, torn between fear of old pain and the pull of newfound loyalty in the woman's defense. The woman's voice rang clear, filled with defiance. "He isn't worthless. He is loyal, brave, and more human than you will ever be." Her words cut through the air like a blade. The dog trembled, not from fear but from a dawning realization. He was no longer a discarded creature, but a soul recognized for his true worth. The kitten pressed closer, purring despite her fear. The man's sneer faltered as the dog stepped forward, his eyes no longer downcast but steady, reflecting loyalty and strength. The scar that once symbolized pain now gleamed under the sun as a mark of survival. In that moment, the dog chose not only to endure but to reclaim his place as protector, his journey shifting forever. The street fell silent as tension thickened between the woman and the cruel man. The dog stood firmly, no longer trembling but radiating defiance. The man sneered, stepping closer, his hand raised as if to strike. The woman shouted, "Don't you dare!" her voice shaking yet resolute. The dog's instincts surged, his body moving between the man and the woman, shielding her with steady resolve. The kitten pressed against his chest, her small body trembling. The man's words dripped with venom. "He's nothing but a stray. He belongs in the gutter." Yet the dog's eyes told another story. They no longer carried fear, but the steady fire of loyalty. The moment of confrontation had arrived, and the dog was ready to face it. The man's hand moved swiftly, but the dog reacted faster, teeth bared, a growl rumbling from deep within his chest. The sound echoed with raw power, startling the man into hesitation. The woman gasped, her hand reaching toward the dog, but stopping as she realized he was not lashing blindly. He stood, a wall of courage, every muscle straining to defend. The kitten hissed softly, tail puffed, her tiny body mirroring his bravery. The man muttered curses, stepping back as the dog advanced one step forward, his scarred muzzle catching sunlight like a badge of survival. The dog's growl grew louder, vibrating in the still air, not of violence but of warning, a vow that no harm would come to those he protected. The man's face twisted with anger, and he lunged forward, but the dog surged, barking fiercely, forcing him to stumble back. The woman's voice cut through the clash, filled with fury. "Enough! You lost the right to call him yours when you abandoned him." Her words struck like arrows, exposing the truth. The dog stood firm, chest rising and falling with steady breaths, his presence unshakable. The kitten pressed against his leg, eyes wide but steady, as if drawing courage from him. The man glared, but the people in the street began to turn, whispers rising as witnesses gathered. Cruelty had thrived in silence before, but now eyes were upon him, and the dog stood as undeniable proof of survival against betrayal. The man shouted, "This is pathetic," but his voice cracked under the weight of the crowd's stares. Murmurs rippled through the onlookers, some nodding with quiet disapproval. The dog growled low, steady and unwavering, his eyes locked on the man with unbroken resolve. The woman's voice rang again, stronger this time. "He isn't yours. He's family now." The dog stepped closer, his scar catching the sunlight, no longer a symbol of shame but of resilience. The kitten mewed softly, a note of innocence that cut through the tension. The man faltered, his control slipping. He turned his face away, no longer the figure of authority he pretended to be. For the first time, the power was stripped from his cruelty. The man's shoulders sagged as he muttered curses, retreating into the crowd that no longer supported him. The woman knelt, wrapping her arms around the dog, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You're safe now," she whispered, her voice trembling with relief. The dog pressed his head against her shoulder, his scar brushing her cheek, a mark of pain transformed into trust. The kitten curled into her lap, purring softly, her fragile body safe within their embrace. The crowd began to disperse, their whispers fading into silence. In that moment, the dog realized he had reclaimed not only his dignity, but also a place of belonging. He was no longer a discarded stray, but a protector, a survivor, and finally, part of something worth fighting for. The woman led the dog and kitten gently through the town, her hand brushing against his head as though assuring him he was no longer alone. The streets that once mocked him now seemed softer under the glow of evening lights. Shopkeepers peered from their stalls, whispering, their eyes carrying curiosity instead of scorn. The dog walked beside her, shoulders still heavy but heart lighter, every step tethered to her kindness. The kitten padded close, tail flicking as though she sensed safety for the first time. The woman's voice was tender as she said, "We're going home." The words wrapped around him like a promise, unfamiliar yet deeply craved. For the first time, the road ahead no longer felt endless, but filled with possibility. They arrived at a small cottage on the edge of town, its windows glowing with golden warmth. The woman pushed open the gate, whispering encouragement as the dog hesitated at the threshold. His paws paused on the stone path, memories of rejection pressing against him. The kitten mewed, darting ahead with eager steps, disappearing through the open door. The woman knelt, her voice soft but firm. "You belong here. Trust me." Her hand extended, and slowly, with a shiver of uncertainty, he stepped forward. The creak of the door was not harsh but welcoming, and as he crossed the threshold, the air smelled of bread and comfort. His heart, once chained by pain, trembled at the thought of peace within these walls. Inside, the air carried scents of bread and wood smoke, a comfort the dog had long forgotten. He moved slowly, paws clicking against the wooden floor, ears flicking at each sound. The kitten darted under a chair, curling into a soft rug with a purr of delight. The woman set down a bowl of water and bread, her smile soft as she whispered, "Eat, you're safe here." The dog lowered his muzzle, lapping cautiously, his body trembling not from fear but from disbelief. Each bite grounded him, each sip felt like healing. He lifted his gaze to the woman, her face lit with quiet joy, and something stirred within him, the fragile beginning of trust being rebuilt. Later that evening, the woman sat by the fire, the crackle of wood filling the quiet room. The dog lay nearby, his body stretched on a soft blanket, the kitten curled atop his back, purring in rhythmic waves. He lifted his head, eyes fixed on the flames, memories of cold nights on the streets flickering through his mind. The woman's hand reached out, brushing along his scar, and for the first time he did not flinch. Her touch was gentle, filled with acceptance, as though she saw not brokenness but strength. His eyes softened, and a faint sigh escaped, the weight of past pain easing. The firelight danced across his scarred muzzle, no longer a mark of shame but of survival and love earned. The night deepened, stars glimmering faintly through the cottage window. The woman whispered softly, "You're home now," her voice carrying both relief and promise. The dog closed his eyes, his breathing steady as the kitten nestled closer. The house creaked gently, not in menace but in comfort, a rhythm of safety. The dog's heart, once fractured by cruelty, now carried warmth stitched together by kindness. Though scars remained, they no longer defined him. They told a story of survival, of love found after despair. His loyalty, once rejected, now had purpose again. As sleep claimed him, he felt not like a stray but like family. And within that moment of peace, his journey of healing truly began. Morning light spilled across the cottage yard as birds filled the air with song. The dog stepped outside, the kitten at his heels, their breaths forming small clouds in the crisp air. The woman followed, carrying a basket of laundry, her smile bright as she watched them. For a moment, the dog froze, overwhelmed by the simplicity of peace. No shouting voices, no cruel hands, only warmth and belonging. The kitten pounced at his tail playfully, and he lowered his head, nudging her gently, his heart lighter than ever before. The woman whispered, "This is your family now," and the words lingered in the quiet morning like a vow. The stray had found more than survival. He had found home. The dog lay in the sunlit yard, his scar no longer a mark of pain, but a symbol of endurance. The kitten curled beside him, batting at a fallen leaf. The woman knelt to scratch behind his ears, her laughter soft as he leaned into her touch. Once he had been shunned as worthless, but now his loyalty and courage shone through, witnessed by those who once turned away. Neighbors passed by the cottage fence, some pausing with smiles, their judgment replaced with quiet admiration. The dog's amber eyes lifted toward the horizon, not with fear but with trust, the weight of his past balanced by the promise of tomorrow. For the first time, his heart was unburdened. Later that day, the woman carried the kitten in her arms, while the dog walked proudly by her side through town. People who once mocked now looked with softened eyes, whispers turning to admiration. A child pointed and said, "Look, Mama, the brave dog," and the words struck like balm to old wounds. The woman's smile grew as she explained, "He's family now." The dog's scar gleamed in the light, no longer a reminder of betrayal but of strength earned through hardship. Kitten mewed softly, her tiny head resting against the woman's shoulder. Together they walked, a picture of resilience and unity, rewriting the story the world had once written for them. As twilight approached, the woman, the dog, and the kitten returned home, the sky painted in hues of orange and violet. The dog stood at the cottage gate, gazing toward the horizon, his chest rising with steady breaths. The kitten climbed onto the fence post, swatting at fireflies that drifted in the growing dusk. The woman's voice was gentle, filled with gratitude. "You saved us as much as we saved you." The dog turned, pressing his head against her hand, his loyalty unwavering. The day faded into night, but the weight of loneliness no longer haunted him. Within the walls of the cottage, within their shared bond, he had finally discovered the meaning of family. Night settled quietly, stars scattering across the sky as the world grew still. Inside the cottage, the woman lay in bed, the kitten curled at her feet, while the dog rested near the door, guarding them with steady devotion. His eyes closed slowly, not from exhaustion, but from peace. Memories of cruelty no longer bound him. They had become stepping stones to this moment. He was no longer a stray searching for scraps of love. He was protector, companion, and family. The scar on his muzzle caught the moonlight filtering through the window, no longer a wound but a symbol of survival. In that final stillness, he knew his journey had brought him exactly where he belonged.